Hello everyone on YouTube, and top of the morning to ya if you're watching this in the morning. Since St. Patty's Day is coming up, I decided to go over the symbolism of a film that is from Ireland. That's right, folks. I'm going to go over a family film that has originated in Ireland in the year 2014, and it was a big hit too. It is Song of the Sea. This is a very cute and charming animated story. This has also been made by the Books of Kells people. So, the story focuses on two siblings. Ben, a young boy who doesn't like Saoirse very much and partially blames her for losing his mother. And they have to trudge their way back home, well, in a reluctant fashion, because they were taken from to the city by their grandmother. Not only that, but they also have to retrieve and find the Selkie coat that belonged to their mother, and Saoirse is the original Selkie. So for some of you who may be confused with this term and not familiar with the Irish myths, a Selkie is basically a mermaid but with seal fur instead of fishtail. You see, Selkies, when they go on land, they would take on a human form and carry around a seal pelt. They're usually found in love stories. Along the way, though, Ben has to deal with a lot of hard obstacles, which also include the infamous Owl Witch, a very powerful character who can turn anyone to stone by sucking up their feelings. As if White Diamond was bad enough. Anyway, Ben was basically having to overcome his personal feelings as well as what had happened all those years ago. Along the way, he encounters a lot of fun and cheerful characters as well that help him come to terms with what happened and then accept Saoirse as a sister. Not only that, but over time, they help their family come to terms with what happens. So, let's begin with the characters. Yeah, you could sort of say that Ben and Saoirse's dad is kind of part of the reason they were in the conflict in the first place. You see, he was very distant toward his family ever since their mother died, but he was always attached to Saoirse for the majority of the movie. This distance was similar to the giant in Ben's and his mother's story. This giant used to have a wife, but suddenly had died. So grieved by this loss, the giant practically cried tears that resulted in oceans and rivers and had to be turned to stone by his own mother, the Owl Witch, which what made her very terrifying in the first place. Based on that phenomenon, if you see how the stone formation is similar to the giant, as well as how the giant is similar to Ben's father, you could definitely agree that this is a hard representation of how Ben's father became stone cold, unfeeling, which is why stone represents ideally of how people can be distant from the reality they know and don't know how to deal with it. In a lot of ways, Ben's father represents people dealing with grief by putting themselves emotionally distant from each other. But this emotional distance can definitely be unhealthy. So in some ways, in the realistic aspect, Ben's father's trying to hold up, trying to be brave for his family, but in doing so, he also become devoid of feeling, losing his sense of empathy toward Ben, and his attachment to Saoirse just only meant that he was holding on to the past and not letting go, stuck in time. I don't know the name of this character, but he was the one who helped give Ben some advice as well as paying attention to his own memories. And in some ways, the long-bearded guy is similar to the boatman in the movie, who would always give some advice and was patient with Ben. And as for the fairies that were seen in the beginning of the movie that helped sort of, in the long journey of things, represented a certain culture, or the old Irish culture that is fading away. As some of you recall, the fantasy creatures are having an issue in this movie. They want to still remain in existence, but thanks to modern day technology and such, they're starting to fade away from memory. So the fairies represent, again, the old customs that have been told for generations to come and are struggling to survive. Not only that, but how many of you still remember the old Irish stories that you recall? I think in some ways it's also representing of cherishing the memories you have of other people, even the painful ones, if you want to be able to move on. So, in the beginning of a movie, Granny comes off as a bit brash and harsh. She definitely feels like she knows what's best for the children and thought that the father wasn't doing a good job of taking care of them, which is why she decided to bring them to the city. But in some cases, she did have some softer sides, but she always had those dang pills with her whenever she needed to treat something. Now, as for the Owl Witch, she's a little similar, believing that by turning other people to stone, she can have some sense of control in the situation, which is why she probed everyone into a stone-like coma, including Saoirse, because they would be free of their emotions forever and never be plagued by that. She believed that Saoirse's silky powers may cause trouble with the harmony she's trying to bring. Towards the end of the film, when Ben confronts her and it unleashes all the emotions that were bottled up in those special jars of hers, she realized the consequences of her actions and that she was doing horrible things to poor Saoirse. Now, in some media, owls can definitely come off as sinister-looking or malevolent characters that you don't want to be involved with, where in some cases owls can have an evil representations of being found in certain dreams, while in other cases owls can represent wisdom, the wisdom of knowing things. In the movie, the grandma kept claiming, "I know what's best for the children." And in the movie, the Owl Witch does the same thing too, repeats, "I know what's best for everyone." But over time, it's that certain knowledge or the false knowledge that people believe that they know what's best, and when in reality they don't. They don't know how to handle the situation. I also believe that it represents people who bottle up their feelings. So, in the movie, you would see that Granny always has a jar of pills with her in order to handle her emotions, which could cause some heart issues, which is no different from people who have trying to get medication for those sorts of conditions. While with the Owl Lady, her jars literally hold emotion with it because people view emotions as bad, which wasn't the case. So the jars represent people bottling up their feelings instead of acknowledging them or even recognizing them and sharing it with others, which in a lot of ways is not emotionally healthy, which is what Granny is definitely doing when she was bringing the kids to her city home. She didn't realize that not only was she denying them of her feelings, it's almost as if she's denying her own feelings and wanting to avoid them at all times. As I said before, seals are mentioned through the first portion of the movie. You see, seals come off as very playful creatures, and they're basically the form that selkies take when they're in the water. And with Saoirse, she comes off as this cute white little baby seal, and you can't help but adore her. Anyway, seals have many concepts of symbolism in them, but usually they're joy, happiness, strength, stability, and loyalty, just to name a few. And in some cases, it definitely represents Saoirse. You see, Saoirse definitely comes off as this very quiet girl. She's always silent and follows Ben around, and despite of how Ben treats her like garbage, such as the time where he forced to leash her, Saoirse never left his side. She never even rejected him. That sort of loyalty helps her gives the strength she needs in order to speak her mind and her decision to move forward with her life despite what happened with her mother. You see, she's a victim of selective mutism, which means it's a mental condition where children can mute themselves even though they're capable of speaking. So in some ways, the seals of this movie represent the struggles that the family faced in Song of the Sea of finding the strength to move forward and finding that sense of happiness and joy that they've been deprived for so long. And that's why it felt like it was important to make a mention of this, because it's not every day you would have a movie that involves seals, and I'm very glad that they also cooperate with some happiness, which is what the mother brought to them before she left at the end of the movie. So, in the majority of this film, there's always been a mention about the Selkie coat, which is basically what provided some form of life to Saoirse. It isn't just a coincidence that there was a white seal in the film, as well as that there was just a white coat, where traditionally seals are brown. It turns out the white can also represent life in certain cultures, while it could also represent death, because in some cases, Saoirse's mother died while wearing that coat and gave birth to her, and then Saoirse was almost ready to die, but then the coat saved her life. So in some ways, the coat is also shown as a connection that gave a painful reminder to Ben's father, but also gave Saoirse a sense of connection to the mother that she was never able to meet. And so that's why she held on to it for as long as possible. As for the shell that Ben had, it always had some form of feminine concept, though I'd rather not get a joke out of this one. Anyway, Ben also views it as his only connection to the mother as well. He uses it to hear the ocean. In some ways, it probably represents the communication that he once had with his mother, as well as just learning to listen to other people, which is why he never was able to listen to Saoirse. Over time, Ben also finds this as a resurrection when the shell was being used to help change his perspective of things, as well as it helps Saoirse give that sense of renewal to her purpose and accepting the fact that her life with Ben could be just as great as it was with the connection with the mother. Even though she may never have that experience, Ben slowly develops as a new person. When both of these objects were vanished towards the end of the film, it basically means that they were letting go. When the shell shattered, Ben was more concerned about Saoirse at that point where she was slowly dying, as well as the coat vanished into thin air. This represented both of them finally letting go of the grief and sorrow that came from losing their mother. Even though it's not permanent goodbye, it made it no less painful and a great tearjerker to the majority of the film, which is one of the reasons why you gotta love this film. Anyway, this is what I had done with the symbolism and the concepts of it. I hope you enjoy, and please subscribe whenever possible. This is Dragon Videos signing off.